Greetings, friends. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Chlöe Goodchild. We were just exchanging notes beforehand. We hardly could stop in terms of some of the experiences we've been through and some of the things I'm very intrigued about to share with you about her work. Now, I know many of you know Chlöe's work quite well. But for those of you who do not, she is the author of The Naked Voice, which is a book I highly recommend, and also the work that comes out of that, the Naked Voice work. This is a remarkable book. I just finished reading it, I have to say, and going through it. And it's a combination of personal story, personal biography, amazing stories. It's part workbook in that there are, whatever you want to call them, experiences, experiments, practices, deep questions about how to free the voice. And one of the things that it also is, it gives the much bigger picture of the voice. In other words, it's not just about my voice or your voice or my body or your body, but how all this relates to our world today and why it really matters. And that I found, just remarkable and totally unusual. And I've read a lot of books on sound and done a lot of sound practice myself. So I'm going to sort of take the lead here and toss some questions out to Chlöe. We'll have a conversation. We'll have some chants part of the way through, and then we'll see how we go. I probably will bring in some of my Aramaic Jesus work just because that was promised. Only because this whole cosmology out of which Jesus comes is so sound orientated, and is much more sound than sight orientated, actually, in a way that we'll get into probably later. So, Chlöe, welcome.
Thank you. I feel very, very honored to be here. Thank you so much, Neil, for this opportunity to communicate with you about our great life's vocational passion.
It is that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because we only have about an hour or so, hour and 15 minutes, I'd like just to jump right in off the deep end. What is the naked voice to you?
What is the naked voice? The naked voice, for me, it is the sound of one's true self. It's the sound of one's true self. And that is the self that is experienced directly as an experience of oneness, that is literally derived from a close encounter with one's authentic voice. And that means the voice not of the personality so much as the voice of the soul, the voice of the soul.
That's what impressed me about the book. It's like I had not really seen that before. And as I say, I've investigated this area quite deeply over many years because sound has to do with language, and I've done a lot of chanting, especially of Middle Eastern languages or native Southwest Asian languages, and so there's a whole sound mysticism there. And the Aramaic, again, I'm not going to do this throughout, so don't worry. But the Aramaic for the soul, the word for the soul is really a breath that is always connected everywhere, all times.
Beautiful.
So, and that's Jung's self with a capital S, or in my books, I tend to call it soul, just to distinguish it from the small self. Yes. But it all begins with breath, yes. And it begins from, you could say, a fullness that is before our individual personal lives. It begins from a sound, a breath. All of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, where does that come from?
Where indeed? Well, that's the Zen question. What was my face before I was born, and all that lovely stuff. So, the other thing you point out, which is very much all in the Middle Eastern sound mysticism, is that, the universe, our own bodies, everything we perceive, this is actually a form of sound or vibration. And, and so if we think that we're going to only be, improving our own voice for some purpose, which can happen, we're limiting the ceiling of our experience or the depth of it, whichever way you want to look at it.
Right.
And that also really impressed me because you're relentless in this book. You keep driving people deeper, deeper, deeper. And I said, "You go, Chlöe." I love it. It's a
It's re-
fabulous.
it's as if one has no choice about it. Do you know what I mean?
I know, indeed,
It's a choiceless activity, isn't it? It's a choiceless
it is.
activity,
It
and
is.
it's certainly, it's something which I think once people realize that the um, the fear that we are brought up to believe is a reality is actually once you start sounding what fear sounds like, which seems to be the major stumbling block for many people when they come to the voice. They think, oh, I can't do this. I'm not a musician. I was told I couldn't sing at school, all those things. But the fear that obviously that we're aware is quite all pervading, more now than perhaps we've ever experienced, because we're on this kind of edge of a whole new consciousness emerging that one can feel so profoundly. But I love it when people say, I'm really frightened to sing. I feel really frightened to express myself. You say, well, okay, well, something brought you here. Who was it? Something brought you here. The energy is clearly there to explore. And so you might as well just find out. So very often I just ask people, how do you feel? And how does that sound? And very often that apprehension is usually what shows up, which intensified becomes a kind of fear thing. And but what's so fascinating about the music of fear is that once you sound it, you realize it's not fear at all. It's a state of awe. And this is what I suppose I've just been really discovering over decades, is that if you know that every emotional state has its own antidote, whether the state is positive or negative. And then, so the key is, number one, is to really access the authenticity of the sound. The ego has decided it may be fear, or the ego has maybe decided it's depression, or, that it's some kind of narrative that somebody else is to blame for. you know.
Yes. Yes.
And in fact, but who cares about that? Because once you start sounding, you actually access a place that is prior to the narrative itself, as long as you, and I've learnt this from working with people, I follow the question with, not only how do you feel and how does that sound, but what quality of silence does your voice leave behind?
Yes.
And that takes away all the egoic anxiety about performance, separateness, duality. It's just you're suddenly, your focus of attention is on the silence that arises from the sound, and then the sound that arises from the silence.
Yes, that also struck me about your book, and it's on my list. That the role of silence in all of this, I find in very few other places.
Wow.
Really. I learned about it from Samuel Lewis, who started the Dances of Universal Peace. And he wrote a almost unknown paper about developing, you could say, this spiritual quality of the voice. I forgot what he calls it. And he says you always begin with silence. And you hear the sacred sound first. And then you feel as though, wait until you hear it and then allow it to come through you, so that it's not you making sound, it's something bigger coming through you. And because the Sufis have this, some Sufi traditions have this, how do we say, modus operandi. It's a methodology where you connect in the inner plane to your teacher as a help, not as a place you're supposed to stop.
Right.
But this, what I think it's called in the Indian tradition, the diksha, or the transmission. Well, the Sufis have this where you connect and then they help you, but you don't stop with them. You keep going. So Samuel Lewis says, you listen into the silence and then begin making sound. And when you hear anything in your voice that you don't like, just open around it. Keep opening around it. Keep opening around it. Take it in and begin to feel your voice more than you're listening to it with your ears. So this was a method I've used with people quite a bit. It's difficult, but it's possible because we have all, as you say, we have all these messages about our voice. My voice is this, my voice is that. It comes from here. It's my mother's fault. On and on and on. And it takes a while. It's not to say it's done overnight. It's not magic, but it's very possible, and everyone has that naked voice or natural voice.
Yeah. Well, I love how you're describing it as keep opening around it. I love that. Yeah, that sort of feeling of you're already what you're doing by doing that is you're opening to a wider field of awareness
Yes,
immediately. Yeah,
yes,
and that awareness is informing what is actually coming out of the mouth,
yeah. I
of
mean, if you look in the Middle Eastern traditions in general, over which come out of a nomadic spirituality, a pre-agricultural spirituality, the heart is everything.
right.
The heart, however, does not exclude what's above and what's below. It's just that one focuses one place to start, and then one keeps expanding, expanding, expanding. So this notion of, just open around it, open around it. This is why the Sufis have such an element on emphasis on the heart. And it was same for Jesus. He doesn't have a word for brain. He really doesn't
Oh,
have a word for mind. No, brain, mind, none of this. There's no Aramaic word for that. It's heart. It's all
what a
heart.
relief.
No, I know. There's nothing.
That's great. Oh my goodness. I mean, and then you understand. Yes, he that hath ears, she that hath ears to hear.
Let them
And so
hear.
let
Sure.
them hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
How does it,
absolutely.
can you remind me how that sounds in Aramaic? That's
That one I'd have to look up, Chloe.
yeah, yeah.
I'll get it to you later.
I just can't get enough of
The
your
uh, the word for hear is related to the word for sound, which is shem or shemaya in
right.
Aramaic. That I do know.
Yes.
The grammar of that phrase I don't know. Shem is that aspect of our connection through vibration, and
Right.
this is what in his uh, sayings, Yeshua's sayings, is called Shemaya. When we're in that realm of sound, what you would call the field of sound, this is Shemaya. This is
Yeah.
what they translated as heaven.
Oh,
So heaven is not somewhere else in Jesus's way of looking. It's here.
yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not elsewhere, but it's here. It's here and everywhere. So it includes me, the universe, nature, and beyond and beyond.
Do you know what you're really highlighting here is actually starting to happen. It's coming out of the wildness of these times, isn't it? People are really realizing that unless we really reconnect with the heart center and connect with the earth, connect with nature, I am so privileged to. I've just moved to the Cotswolds. Literally, just 4 miles down the road is this center called Matara. And I'm
Oh,
like,
there you
what?
go.
It's
Perfect.
like it's like a spaceship that just landed or something. What was that there last week? It's like, and of course, Ma is is obviously the root sound for just the whole of matter
Everything.
and the Great
Yeah.
Mother and the whole thing. Ma was the name of my own teacher, and under my Ma, who was one of the great women saints of the 20th century. She showed up in dreams when I was on Crete, in fact, which I guess is not a surprising place to encounter her. She had already left her body, but and I didn't know till I actually met Ramdas that was who I'd been dreaming of. And she obviously in Crete, it's as if even
Yeah.
despite all the invasions of the island, uh, there's still this embodied, integrated relationship fundamentally. Uh, with sound and with the earth, these pre Christian caves that I found myself
Mm.
singing in just a few weeks
Mhm.
ago. And you have to do almost nothing. These caves are just placed, seemingly placed above these healing spas that must be several thousand years old, that were apparently run by these feminine nymphs. And So you can see how these healing spas would have been filled with water, and then the sound would have literally resonated into the sounds of the caves. What completely blew my mind was just being in the middle of one of these caves and almost doing nothing, nothing. And then as long as you found the right sound, or the sound found you, just a tiny, just like that. Whoa! It would come right back at you, and that's such an example of what you're describing, this receiving of revelation, receiving of what is essentially now all our quantum scientists are kind of explaining to us what that actually means,
Yes.
in terms of frequency, is literally present all the time. We are walking about in this resonance all the time.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
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 Mm,
It's remarkable. One of the things that struck me about your book also is the prevalence of, well, what in my background was called somatic practices, that is body awareness,
right.
or body oriented, because I studied this for quite a while actually when I
Great.
first got involved in this area and was doing chanting, and I was involved with Dances of Universal Peace.
Oh, yeah.
So, a lot of the inspiration for my chants
Mm,
pours itself into this form, which is both
mm,
sound and movement, or linked sound and movement, if you will.
right.
But I hadn't run into any, and I've read many of the books in your bibliography, but
Mm,
I hardly notice anyone else that brings the body in, just, to put it
right.
baldly,
That's
because it tends to be, a lot of it tends to be about making overtones or
mm,
this or
mm,
that, or,
mhm.
producing
Yeah.
sound, which is another form of performance, but
Mm,
not really
mm,
feeling the sound
mm,
really
mm.
deeply. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that really struck me. I mean,
Mm.
how did all that happen for you?
Well, that's a very special. Thank you for asking that question. Um, when I encountered Ananda Ma, these I'd been having these dreams. She would be swallowing me whole and spewing me out as a man and a woman, like very very dynamic dreams. And we used to, in a previous incarnation, we used to take Ramdas around Europe. And and a team of us just used to serve everyone. There'd be maybe 100, 200 people there. We'd serve everybody, and he would do his amazing speaking. And one night he decided he wanted to give a talk on the greatest saints of the 20th century. And one of them was Ananda Ma. And as soon as I saw her, I realized, oh my God, literally, yes, this is she. This is she. And so the door opened wide. I literally, there's almost a sense of a disintegration of the old self, of my old kind of, striving to, find the voice and,
Yeah,
and a
yeah,
kind of a much more sort of meaningful, dramatic story going there with, finding it. But of course, that hunger has to be there, doesn't it? There has to be a hunger for it, for that. Tatuamasi.
yes,
It's that
yes.
that thing. And so I went roaring off to India, and that time I was just synchronistically starting to explore the Indian musical philosophy with an incredible North Indian master of Indian raga in France. How did he show up? Again, just more blessings, more just graceful blessings showing, when you're in what those synchronicities, the power of synchronicity. And so I started realizing, oh my God, I'd been brought up in music at Cambridge, again, very privileged education, very grateful for that. At the same time as, singing the whole kind of Western sacred repertoire of music, which absolutely, was the greatest blessing of all at that time through my teenage years and early 20s. But still, I always felt there was something missing. And, you know, there was always this sense of, and my nature already is to be more of an ascending nature than a descending one. So the etheric always meant a lot more to me than the physical. And so what happened was I went roaring off to India. I was grounded instantly in the unchanging note. And that, which of course is absolutely, that is the absolute source of your extraordinary teachings, that unchanging reality just started to make its way through my whole system. And so I found myself on one day working with, an incredible vocal teacher of the sargam and and all the whole Indian scale and so on. And then the next day, sitting with non-dual teachers who were essentially saying the same thing, which is that nothing's happening. So I eventually met this incredible teacher who came to be known as Papaji. At that time, he was known as Harilal Punjaji, and he was a direct disciple of Ramana Maharshi. And that's another long story, but the upshot of that was spending 6 days with him in 1990. My entire egoic mind disappeared for about 6 months. And so I came back to England, if you like, completely blissed out, but also totally disembodied. So, not grounded, not really grounded. So I couldn't even think to teach anymore because the Om was the only sound that was coming out of my mouth. And so I would just walk about and find myself in churches with a harmonium and just start singing, and sometimes there'd be more than that, and then it would return to the Om again. But finally, by the grace of God, in one of these concerts that I was singing, a Japanese gentleman showed up, and he was at the back of the concert hall, and I came to the front at the end of the concert, and he said, hello, I think I can see what you are doing. And I went, really? You can? Oh, thank God. Can you help me? I am in blissful joy, but I am ungrounded. So he said, you're sending the sound too far out there. He said, all the people in the audience, they're going, where's she gone? So basically what happened was he said, I can bring you down, I can bring you down, bring you down, bring you down. So that began a 25-year, very patient Japanese master of Shintaido with us. And it was, when I say us, what became a sort of evolving, inquiring exploration into the nature of sound awareness, sound intelligence, sound wisdom, as located through the egoic mind, the soul, the spirit, and through these energy movements, which together we crafted. When I say we crafted, we were crafted by them, if you like, which you'll know so much about. And
yes,
so,
you mention him in your book, and there are some of these practices, if you will, or this in your book. And again, it's fabulous how much you put in this book. I'm astounded, actually. And having worked with publishers recently, they are not into having all this in books anymore, I can tell you, because they keep making them smaller and smaller. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fabulous. I had a similar experience in India in 1979.
great.
I'll make the story short. We were sent by my teacher, Moinuddin, who was Samuel Lewis's caliph. That means his spiritual successor, his dharma heir, if you will.
Yeah.
He thought he was dying of kidney disease. And he sent a group of us, about 13 of us, together with his successor, the person he had designated as a successor, to go to Turkey, Pakistan, and India and meet all the teachers of Samuel Lewis who were still alive and get their blessing. That was the mission. So we were there for 3 months. This is pre-internet, no reservations. I ended up being in charge of managing the whole thing. And you know what it's like trying to make reservations for 13 people in the Indian railway system, much less, you arrive at some place and you're descended upon in terms of where you're going to stay. And we had a limited budget. So it was all like what the Sufis call inshallah. But when I got home, and part of this, we met Mataji Krishnabai, Mother Krishnabai, in Kanhangad. She was still alive at that time.
Right.
And she was one of Samuel Lewis's teachers. He had met her personally, as well as Papa Ramdas, not Baba Ram Dass, but Papa Ram Dass.
Yes.
And so we stayed at her ashram for about a week, actually. She sang for us. She gave us daily sort of darshan, but once she also sang for us, you know, a Sri Ram melody I'd never heard anywhere before and never heard anywhere since. I still know it, actually.
Oh, I'd love
And
to hear it.
I, you know, then I decided, you know, I'm totally burnt. You know, if we're going to do the rest of this month and a half, you know, I need a break. So I'm going to take a spiritual retreat at the ashram. What could be better? So I'm all set up. I'm in the room, you know, they brought me my food, and it's going to be like 4 or 5 days retreat. And immediately I get like deathly sick. You know, my whole body breaks down.
Right.
And so all this thing about doing spiritual practice and getting enlightened and holy, it's like I'm barely hanging on here, people, you know. But when I finished this whole thing, it was like I was a different person. It's like I'd been taken apart and put back together again. It was very, well, I didn't know what to think of it. I was a young guy in my 20s.
Yeah.
You know, this was, like I say, a long time ago. And when I returned to the US, it was like I was totally shattered.
Wow.
I was totally shattered. We went into New York City. We landed there. I was staying in Manhattan with a friend, and I'm thinking, I'm wandering around saying, "Oh my God, this is so quiet here." Because I was used to India and Pakistan for 2.5 months, just, you know, sort of living rough, almost. So it's you know, it does change you.
Oh, it does. It's indescribable, isn't it? And why is it? How is it that, you know, that we found ourselves born into the Western field, you know, the whole kind of colonial privileged world that we've been brought up in. And yet I never felt more at home till I got to India. As soon as I was there, it was like, oh, thank God. Just the whole kind of cultural, I mean, obviously immense chaos and all kinds of, you know, let's kind of idealize it, but this fundamental kind of ancient vibration of devotion.
Yes,
you know,
it really is.
That is natural, that's just natural. And again, that is to do with the engagement with the earth and with the reverence for the earth and all of that, you know. Yeah.
Well, Chlöe, do you have a chat you'd like to share with us at this point? I mean, we talked about that, and that might be a good time to have that.
I would love to share something. I'm tempted to share the Tara mantra with you because of the connection with Tara now, who is residing 4 miles down the road. But perhaps I'll just start with this one, which is not a mantra, actually. This is inspired by, I used to tour with the Rumi poet, Coleman Barks.
Coleman, I know Coleman also.
Oh, yeah, what a generous heart. Goodness me, what an extraordinary individual. I met him at a conference in San Francisco, and we had lunch together. He was performing there, Rumi, or sharing Rumi, his recitations. And we just ended up having lunch together, and he just looked at me and he said, "You don't get nervous either, do you?" That was his first statement. "You don't get nervous either, do you?" And it was so brilliant. It was brilliant. And that's when we went off to meet Hamza el-Din. That was where,
I also know, as we talked about, Well, I knew, you know, may Allah preserve his secret. Yeah, he was wonderful, wonderful person.
Yes. Oh, I love that you said that. Thank you for saying that. So this people will be familiar with as the field, and out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. I'll meet you there. Where the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make sense anymore. And so that was Coleman's translation. And I said, would you mind if I just simplify that and add the word singing in there somewhere? And he was very generous. He said, just do what the hell you like. So it goes like this. Out beyond ideas, singing field, I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Beyond the veil of separation, where we can feel just how we can heal, I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Beyond the walls of isolation, there is a space, a way of grace. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Beyond despair and misinformation, there is one call. Love one, love all. Love one, love all. Love one, love all. Love one, love all. Beyond ideas of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, a singing field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you here. I'll meet you
Thank you, Chloe. And one of the things Samuel Lewis used to teach about dances of universal peace was to always leave silence at the end of everything, and then feel into that silence.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how much it's still done, but it's a real thing.
Yeah. And it has a way of extending itself, doesn't it? It just,
Yes.
I'm noticing as I get older, of course, that it's just becoming more important than the sound. It's the sound before sound.
It is. It's that, what is it called? The silent life, as Inayat Khan calls it, or the unstruck sound. All of that is there. You know, I'd never had any formal musical background. I still don't, actually. So I began everything just chanting on one note because I wanted to, you know, find myself, really. And when I returned from India, I found things were starting to come through me, and melodies, and I didn't know where they come from. I didn't think of myself as musical, and they wrapped themselves around, well, they came from meditating on certain sacred sounds. One of the earliest ones that occurred was a friend of mine had a dream, and she said, we all knew the Reverend Joe Miller, who some people know, who was a big influence on the San Francisco Sufi community. He was, well, you can't pigeonhole him. He was a theosophist, he was a Buddhist, he was everything. And he used to chant the mantra at the end of the Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, that is the Gate Gate.
Fabulous.
So my friend came and said, well, I've had a dream, and there, you know, I have movements for this dance of universal peace to this mantra. And the dream told me, you're supposed to get the melody for this. And I said, what, me? So I meditated on it. I'd done it with Joe, and it was just in this aftermath of returning from India, and a melody came through, and it's remarkable. I mean, it's since been recorded several times by different people, actually.
Oh, I
didn't know I still don't know where it came from, really. So, you know, I became really intrigued by all this, and because this work, that as it was evolving for me, was a combination of sound with movement.
Yes.
I was also working with, you could say, the equivalent in movement of singing sa. You know, where sa means you're just, you know that. It's in your book. So sa, for those listening, means you're just singing one note, one note, one note, one note. It's the one note practice. Well, the equivalent in movement is to breathe with the sound and then walk with it. You know, feel the original rhythm of the sound.
Yeah, I love that.
Walk with it until your breathing and your heart conform to that rhythm. So rather than the other way around. So rather than choreographing movements, which Samuel Lewis never wanted, choreographing them from our ego mind, he wanted the sound and the movement to arise naturally from the heart. And this is something very difficult to teach people. I mean, I would send them to you now, actually, but hardly anyone's interested in it anymore. So this whole aspect of having the sound and the movement come from something deeper than the self, deeper than the small self, I should say. I want to clarify that. And that's how I got involved with somatic psychology, really, because I thought, well, I've had all these deep experiences with sound and movement. I want to learn what other people found out about this. So being me, you know, this is where I went to graduate school and got a degree in somatic psychology. And I ended up studying with some wonderful, wonderful people. I studied with Charlotte Selver and Charles Brooks, who started the sensory awareness work. I studied with them personally. It was amazing. And I studied with Gerda Alexander, who started Utiny, who used to come from Denmark and teach us for like a month. And after this, you know, this was also changing me. This is where I really got more deeply involved with my Aramaic Jesus work, which I thought was just going to be a little thing over here. I had, as most people know, some people know who've listened in here, I was editing the diaries of Samuel Lewis because I had a journalistic background. And I was given that task. And he writes in one of his diaries that before he dies, Samuel Lewis says, he wants to learn to pray the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, because this would be like a zikr for Jesus. Zikr means a remembrance, a chanted remembrance. And so he wants to learn these Aramaic words, but he never did that. And so this just like boing, this pops out at me. And I said, Aramaic, Aramaic, who's got Aramaic? Who knows this? So I ended up going to a friend of Samuel Lewis's, the of blessed departed, blessed name, Rabbi Zalman Schachter, Shalom.
Oh, yes, I know him, yeah.
And he gave me a version of the Aramaic to chant. And I'll keep this short, but I took this on a long retreat, and I began to chant the words of the Aramaic as best as I could at the time. I didn't know it at that time properly. And so my body began to make movements that I had not experienced before. And I can say now that it's like 40 years later, and melodies began to come through. And this is what really led to this work that then became books.
Yes.
But it only became books because I went to Matthew Fox and I worked with him for a while. And Matt said, look, you got to learn this Aramaic properly, Neil, and then write books about it. So that's what I did. So I went back to academia and I learned these extra tools. I learned, first of all, if you go to academia, as you know, Chlöe, you have to learn how to speak the language of academia, which is a separate foreign language. And it has its limitations, as all languages do. It has its blind spots, quite large, actually, in terms of actual reality. But it has its language, it's had its methodology. So I learned all of that. And I wanted to test then what I was finding out about the Aramaic and researching now quite deeply with the language with other scholars. And I never actually found anyone who was able to refute what I was doing, but they really didn't want to hear about it, actually, I'll tell you.
Well, that is very, very interesting, because I remember similar things happening sometimes with Coleman Barks also, when we would find ourselves at the end of a performance with Sufi scholars, and they would be questioning his very ordinary use of language. In his case, not even Aramaic, just ordinary English. So that's, it's very important, isn't it? All we all have our own programming. We're all, as one of my teachers, Balsakar, would say, we're all robots of God. But and we have our own programming, according to what we are called here to do. And the academic precision, of course, has been so vital for our culture over the last millennia. But so to actually be faced with someone like yourself who's coming in and going, I really want to know this as a living reality in every cell of the body, is probably quite terrifying for the academic mind.
It is. And if you want to take up something that's really is controversial, go for Jesus.
Well,
because everybody owns Jesus, and then there are people who are Jesus phobic for very good reasons because of their upbringing and their childhood. And so I had to develop all these tools, you could say, not just defensively, although I have sufficient defensive tools, but also to meet people where they are. And this is what I found, that many people who were raised with an unhappy Christian childhood, they found that this is, when they go deeper within themselves, this is quite deep. And so it comes up when they're doing mindfulness or Vipassana or whatever. And so what are they have to deal with it. Well, that's part of what my work has been about.
Absolutely.
Look, here's another way to look at it.
I would love just to hear you speak of how you feel with this new book, your new book, The Aramaic Jesus, coming out now. How does it feel to know that is coming into the world right now? It's a very poignant moment.
Well, I mean, after 40 years of doing the work, and basically being ignored by most people and often misquoted, but or quoted without attribution, which happens quite a bit in my line of work. It all's coming together. And again, I had the voice came, I'll just call it the voice, during what was spring of 2020, which was during Ramadan, actually, during the Muslim fasting. It said, okay, now's the time. This thing's been on your list for a while. Bring it all together, and also place it, it's not just about language or translation. It's about the whole way of looking at life that is different now than
Yeah.
it was at the time of Yeshua. And that's only a couple thousand years ago.
Right.
This was a time when the worldview of people was much more embedded with nature, with community.
Right.
The small self, if we will, was much less, it was growing. It was getting harder and harder. It was getting more separate, but it was much more porous. And so Jesus comes at a time of warning and showing people how really, in my view of it, how to turn from yourself to your soul, using the methodology of the heart, and let the heart turn, let it turn easily. Put some oil on the heart so that you can move between everyday reality and this always on, the soul, the true self, and you just flow between them. So as I say, let the heart move at the speed of light, and so you can handle your everyday reality, and also be in the other place, be in the everywhere and all the time. Because it seems that many of his original listeners, his followers, they had terrible childhood experiences, abusive, and then plus everyone was living under trauma with these, the Romans were sitting on top, and for generations there had been empires running rampant through them. It's like living in a war zone for a couple of centuries. And so people were living in a really disembodied state where they would experience what the usual translations call demons, or these disembodied spirits, or things like that. So it was a different way of looking at life.
Wow.
It was a whole different way of looking at life. This is the main message of this book, in addition to going through and reframing all of my work and then adding more work in, is that people looked at life very differently. Right. When you saw a tree, you didn't just see a piece of lumber, or even the poor tree's dying, or the poor tree's living. No, I'm part of that tree.
Yeah.
And there's a spirit being with and within the tree, around and with the tree, that is part of me.
Right.
And it's hard for us to imagine.
But this is coming back. This is what's happening, what I'm noticing all around me here on the Celtic Isles. Basically, we've got a lot of people literally returning to this understanding.
Yes.
The timing of your book, I think, is extraordinary, because it really is highlighting, and it's almost like an instruction manual for everyone. There's so many people around here in the Southwest, where I am at the moment, who are literally coming together. They are re-acclimatizing, they're reforming themselves, they're coming together in groups, in communities, they're growing their own food again, they're really getting together, they're learning how to do that if they didn't know how to do that before. We have the skills to address what is being, a real issue of mental health, for example, so-called, in our, which is all of us. We all have mental health. It's not like these, it's like we stigmatize certain people as having mental health.
Exactly.
Very often, like Van Gogh, for example, or, other characters who've been these extraordinary visionaries. They're very often the ones that are just so sensitive, but they have a vision for a new world. And that's what I sense from your book. It's offering us to reimagine that possibility again. Not the institutionalized Christ, the real Christ conscious embodiedness of Christ.
Well, that's as each of us come with gifts and with things to do. This is it seemed to me rather arcane and rather obscure thing to pursue, but my heart wouldn't let me stop.
Right. Well, good.
I almost went into some area like you are doing, Chlöe, in that I was combining, Sufi sound practice with somatic experiences that experiments, as we called them, and working with people and like this. But then the Aramaic just took over, and I'm so glad that. Not even knowing you for 30 or 5 years ago, you just took it and ran, and it's what you've done is just amazing. Read this book, friends. I'm a big promoter of other people's books, but the other thing you meant, and I wanted to bring this up, it's on my list, so I don't let it go by. Yes. You put together speaking and singing. In other words, it's not just about singing or singing your note, or all these things that are really great, and relieving yourself of the illusion that you're tone deaf, or all this, which is great. But it's also about connecting our singing and our speaking voices together, so that they become this naked voice of
Yes.
for want of a better word, of
Yes.
authenticity, of sincerity, of, dare I say, truth, not truth as a concept,
Yes.
but truth as what the Sufis would call haq, or Jesus calls, this Chokhmah, the voice of Chokhmah, holy wisdom.
Yeah.
It begins to come through each person.
I love that. I just love that. That just silences me what you've just said because of the power of that word, and the remembrance that each of us has the task this lifetime to remember that holy wisdom within oneself. There's many people, of course, at this time, because of the collapse of politics and all the various institutions we're watching just collapsing around us. What is kind of being restored and arising like a phoenix out of the ashes is the sovereignty of the human soul. And the use of the word sovereignty, I have never heard it used as it is being used in our time, you know. And so you're really prompting me to remember, and for all of us to remember, that we have a responsibility, if you like, to find this authentic voice within ourselves. Now, this is the voice, as we've been describing it, as a voice that is not bound by duality, is not bound by right and wrong doing. It's a voice that is led by the witnessing mind.
Yes.
And so that was the piece that they forgot to teach us about at school, right?
Yeah.
Wow, imagine if we'd all been taught about that at school, and it's in our work, what we're doing is, if you like, at the simplest level of describing it is we're connecting the three power centers, which again, I know is very akin with the Sufi practice of yours, is connecting the belly, the egoic mind with the heart center, with the empathic, devotional heart center, the soul with the divine self, with the spirit mind, which is the pineal gland, is the third eye, as we understand it to be, the only singular organ in the skull. And it seems as if we can just what I've discovered, which is so exciting, which is I thank every person I've ever worked with on this for, is that just as we have a right and a left eye and a third eye, right? We also have a triadic, unified, what I call the trinity of experience. When the naked voice is fully realized, is fully remembered and embodied, you find yourself in this triadic relationship. If you like, the trinity of experience, it's the power of three, it's all of that. So I'd like just to share with you a little story of how I started to understand that if we just can join the left and the right brain this way, we've been brought up to be most at home with speaking, right? School, it's all about speaking. If you're going to sing, you're performing a choir. You're a kind of elite, kind of minority group of people that sang the right note for some fascist music teacher, who only would let you kind of sing that particular vocal scale. And then if you couldn't sing that vocal range, you actually could sing another vocal range, though. You were out. That was it. It's like, what? So not long ago, somebody came, this beautiful, beautiful woman that I was working with, and she taught me so much. So this is just one example of the speaking into singing exercise. She had this beautiful speaking voice, and she was, like you and I, and like many of us here, vocationally driven. She was just so passionate about her work. And she was working with I said, how do you spend your time? What gives you most joy? Which is another theme, probably for us to talk about at some point. She said, well, I work with helping people to die consciously. And I said, wow, tell me about that. And so she had this incredible voice, really honey voice. And it was just so embodied, And I said, well, I think I should be coming to see you. I don't think I have anything to give you. what do you feel about your voice? How do you, we're obviously in this conversation. I'd love to know just how do you feel about this voice of yours? And as soon as I asked her that question, she went, "Oh, I don't really like my voice. My husband doesn't like it. You know." And I was like, "Did you hear what just happened?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, yeah, I think that's why I'm here." So what she told me to say is, "Are you aware you're speaking on F sharp?"
Hmm.
And she was like so disoriented by that concept that speaking could have a pitch like that. So I played F sharp on the harmonium, you see, and as soon as she heard it, she absolutely aligned. She could hear the music in her spoken sound, and everything joined up. The whole system just joined up. And then the question was, well, who is singing? Let's just find out. Who is this? Where is this coming from? And literally, just like that, it wasn't like you've got to do 25 years of voice practice before you can do that. She instantly, her soul, everything just joined up. It was like visibly watching it happen.
Hmm.
So that then basically just gave birth to the question, what's your name?
Hmm.
You see? So if you ask, may I just do this very simple, ludicrously simple
Please.
practice with you? So if you just ask me, Neil, what my name is.
What is your name?
Chlöe, you see? So that's just totally programming of Chlöe, personality of Chlöe. Chlöe. Right. Now, normally we just say our names, right? And we carry on. We don't think about it. We just take our names for granted most of the time. The fact that that is a sovereign sacred name is neither here nor there. But if I remember what I just said, so Chlöe, 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 very ordinary. If I just take the consonants away, so this is where it becomes potentially more Aramaic.
Hmm.
Oe, 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 Oe. Now, if I slow down the consonants, Oe, Oe. This is very similar to what I love how you describe this in your book.
Yes.
Oe. Suddenly you can hear that Oe. What was Chlöe is now a sung melody line that it just happens to sound like that today, you see? So then there's no separation between Chlöe and Chlöe, 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 oh, Chlöe, 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 you see? And what that does is, I'd love to see, you probably know the work of John Stuart Reid, who's doing this wonderful quantum science work with the cymoscope and connecting the frequencies of different sounds. And so I can't wait to see literally an image of the brain just joining up when a person just links the spoken with the sung. So if we can do that, then suddenly we're praying all the time. We're not praying in a kind of pious way. We're just speaking is that holy wisdom speak.
Yes.
It's happening all the time. It's not like something you've got to go to church for, or the synagogue or the temple or the mosque. It's here now. It's in the kitchen. It's with the washing up,
Yeah.
And
one of the somatic issues, and this is really, you find this in many somatic therapies, is that if the person their vibration is centered lower here, and you could say they're feeling their sound more than they're hearing it with their ears, there's less tendency for them to be drawn out into a performance. Yes. And also less anxiety about, say, speaking to people, because you're always home. it doesn't matter what other people are receiving in that sense. If you're home, home is home. Home is everywhere. So, and this is what is often rather difficult because people have performance anxiety, this or that, the other thing. Well, fair enough. But again, that's great. I'd rather have a person be, as you say, more insecure rather than overly secure and be totally into performance persona, because that is a tendency these days. Charisma is substituted for inspiration in many cases. And that's just the world we live in. And because the human self has become more individuated, over this 500, 600 years, at least that period of time, which is great because, we have more of a sense of individual human rights and freedoms, but it's bad in the sense that it becomes more selfish and more self-oriented and more selfie, for want of a better word. But it's both go together. You can't say that it's, it's like, well, this is what we've got. So.
But if you think of Christ turning over the tables in the temple, and
Yes.
I'm watching people, for example, in this day and age, at this time, people are thousands and millions of people are, just rising up and really expressing their concern about what's going on in politics, in education, in
Yes.
medicine, in every field. And but somewhat many of them sort of coming to this kind of frustration. So the witnessing mind is not able to navigate the horror of what they're wanting to change or wanting to transform, if you like.
Yes.
Because the witnessing mind, my sense is, in the light of what you and I are both really talking about, is this is now a time, and this, of course, is the Aramaic Jesus teachings, fundamental teaching of, really finding that moral acumen, the moral, ethical voice,
Yes.
that is free of fear because it's embodied and
Yes.
is able to just simply see through the wilderness of the madness,
Yeah.
to also be able to stand in, we have a practice called just standing in the presence, where you just drop the whole storyline and you just stand in the presence for an hour. Nothing. You just restore your awareness to the root, the second chakra, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, the ninth. You are aware of, as so beautifully you teach, to the right and the left, and to the behind, and to the spiraling of the understanding, to the toroidal awareness of the field of who we are.
Yeah, that's right.
And so my sense is now, as a humanity, we have really got to get together, every bit as much as grow food. We've got to come together to really, really restore the remembrance of this sovereign voice within that is fearless, that knows that it is full of love, unconditional loving presence.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm just so aware that is happening. It's not like we've got to make it happen.
No, none of us have to make it happen. We just do our bit. And,
Right.
we change people, and we don't even have to know how we change people or who we change. I mean, this is why you see things happening from so many different avenues today. And as we were talking about before we began, often very, we'd say uninstitutionalized people, not saying, that, but I mean, people who are not part of spiritual groups, or they're just so-called everyday people are having these experiences, changing their families, changing their communities. And, they don't need to start a nonprofit group or a spiritual order or this or that. They're just doing it, and
It's very
that's how
exciting.
it goes. I mean, you talked about Jesus turning over the tables. I mean, he could have stayed home in Galilee and, lived a nice, comfortable existence, actually, but he didn't. And that's because, the word that's usually translated as righteousness in the Bible, The word
Yes.
that's usually translated as righteousness, which becomes this whole belief thing where you have to believe in Jesus, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Righteousness really means in Aramaic, you could say that rightness where the heart is in balance between the inner, you could say the soul and the self. And so it's a combination of, how would you say, authenticity and sincerity on the inside and honesty on the outside. Act
Absolutely.
honestly, act with
Yeah.
justice. So
Yeah.
it's justice, honesty, sincerity. It's all those things. He said, when you hunger for those things, it's like you're thirsty for them, when they're deeply in your body,
Yeah.
then it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a major, major message.
Oh, oh my God, absolutely that. Absolutely, absolutely. I don't know how many people have come to our work telling me they feel depressed. And you say, how does that sound? What does depression sound like? And they go straight for the minor third. Oh,
Uh-huh.
there's a very often, it's like, oh, I couldn't possibly tell you. Oh, and so I'm already hearing that minor third. And I'm going, that's gorgeous. Oh, that's gorgeous. That is really gorgeous. What do you mean that's gorgeous? I'm depressed. Don't you realize I'm sad? I'm really identified with being sad. And, and then you go, well, just follow that a bit further, and then you get the, oh, well, I'm not a musician. I can't do that because I'm just doodling. This is none of it. You say, well, you have paid to come here, so you might as well just
Yeah.
keep exploring a bit further, and then suddenly, what starts out as, oh, and you go, just go a bit further with that. And before you know where you are, they're just singing this incredible longing, a song. So it's like depression very often veils the longing that we cannot name.
Yeah.
It's that longing for that which we cannot name. Again, no one taught me about that at school. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I know. Well, education
Right.
needs to change, doesn't it?
Oh boy.
Just a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we're coming toward the end here, Chloe. I want to stay on time for everybody that's joining us. I'll share a little Aramaic. I'll share an Aramaic chant with folks that has a lot to do with what we've been talking about. And although it's long, I'll put the words in the chat for people. And this is the first of the so-called Beatitudes that are in Matthew's Gospel. And it's usually translated, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," but actually, the words are ripe, that is, at the right time, at the right place, like a plant is ripening, are those who find their home in the breath, those who hold on to the breath for dear life, if you will, because breath, spirit, and wind, and, cosmic spirit, it's all the same word in Aramaic. So what he says is, and I'll put that in there, Tuvehun, Lemeskenei Baruch, true to the source are those who, Meskene means to be, breath is your first and last possession, this physical breath, which it is, first to come in, last to go out. And he says, if you stay there, if you're at this rock bottom place where it's just breathing, then Dilhone Malkuta, then you will find this, what you were calling sovereignty, Chloe. Jesus calls Malkuta, that is not a kingdom. It's more of a queendom because it's feminine gendered, really, Malkuta in Aramaic. And it's really like the empowerment. Then you have the I can, you have the vision with the energy to accomplish this. And where does that come from? It comes from the sound realm that is everywhere at all times. Dashmaya. It comes from this realm of sound, of interconnection that is beyond this name and form. So we'll do a wee bit of that, as we say up here in Scotland. And then there's a counter melody that came through about, well, it's not really a melody. It's, we have this high singing over the basic tone, and, it's the same in many traditions, as I know from your albums, which are fabulous, by the way. So people look up her albums too. They're on the internet. So anyway, we'll chant a bit of Allah Ruha, which is from John's Gospel. It means really unity, reality, which is really what the name for God means in Aramaic. Reality is breathing. Reality is breath. You know, whatever you call it, the great mystery, it's breathing us. Okay, here we go. So this will take us toward the end and then some goodbyes. Am I going to play guitar or harmonium? Oh, well, I'll play guitar.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
that. Anyway, here we go. Tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya Allah ruha 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 tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya tu behun la maskani baru dil hone malkuta dashmaya dil hone malkuta dashmaya dil hone malkuta dashmaya dil hone malkuta dashmaya. Amen, amen. Chlöe, any last words for now?
The flute of interior time is played whether we hear it or not. What we mean by love is its sound coming in. When love hits the furthest edge of excess, it reaches a wisdom. And oh, the beauty of that knowledge, the fragrance of that knowledge. It penetrates our thick bodies. It goes through walls. Its note has a structure as if a million suns were arranged inside it. This tune, this voice of yours, has truth in it. Where else have you heard a sound like that? And my deepest gratitude to you, Neil. Thank you. Thank you for this.
We may have to do this again, Chloe.
Well, I'm up for it.
Here's a little poem I want to end with.
Oh, great.
And this is from a version that I did of Lala. I know you know Lala from Coleman Barks's book,
Oh, yeah.
where there's a lot more of Lala that Coleman didn't touch. And
Right.
when I did my little book, Wild Wisdom, I put more in. So this is from that book. We are like snow falling in a river, a moment white, then melted forever. I don't trust what is being said through me, not for a moment. Still, I drink the wine of my own words, then I seize the darkness that arises and tear it into little pieces. As the moon wanes, I find a mad person roaming inside, longing for the beloved. I call out to soothe her pain. It is I, Lala, I. The beloved appears, and all further sensing and doing disappear. So that's from the 14th century Kashmiri poet Lala, who is claimed by both Hindus and Muslims today. But, you can look her up, and she is, untapped treasure, really, for most people. Anyway,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chloe, for spending the time and helping me celebrate the new book. And, I can't think of a better way to do it than spend some time and just...
Well, I'm going to sing your praises everywhere and get all our people to read your amazing book. And somebody's just reminded me, The Flute of Interior Time is actually Robert Bly. It wasn't Coleman. Yeah.
He was another big influence on me. I met him when I was a young student, actually.
Me too. That's extraordinary.
I know. Anyway, we're going to go on like this. So, friends, thanks to everyone. The recordings will be up. Audio, video will be up tomorrow or the next day, depending on how it goes. And again, donations are welcome at our websites that you received with your invitation. So thank you for spending the time. And thanks to all of you listening on the recording, which I know many people are. Remember that it's all now anyway.
It's all now.
It's all now. So wherever you are, it's now.
Well,
thank you.
Big gratitude to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great rest of your day or night.